Hi, it's Mother Mantis. I'm back with another Exodus video. This time I'm talking about the Celestials. It's quite a big topic, and because I don't want this video to be too long, I've tried to condense it down as best I can while still maintaining all of the relevant detail. So let me know what you think, and let's talk about the Celestials. When Exodus talks about the Celestials, it is not describing a single species, a single culture, or even any kind of unified empire. Celestial is rather a collective term, a term assigned by later arriving humans to describe the many civilizations that evolved from the earliest human settlers in the Centauri cluster. These early settlers arrived tens of thousands of years before the main wave of human arc ships. Because relativistic travel obeys Einstein's laws, time passed very differently for those who remained in the Centauri versus those still en route from Earth. The result is a civilization gap measured not in centuries, but in tens of thousands of years. Over that span, humanity didn't just advance technology, it diverged biologically, culturally, and politically, producing a wide range of post human societies now collectively labeled as the Celestials. This framing comes directly from Exodus marketing materials and the Traveler's Handbook. The Celestials are described as, quote, a diverse range of alien peoples, evolved from early human settlers and now occupying a, quote, massive cluster-spanning civilization. One of the most commonly cited numbers in community discussion is that there are roughly 22 known celestial variants or dominions. That number appears to be broadly correct, but here's the important limitation. We really don't have any detailed cultural, political, or biological breakdowns for almost all of them. What we do know from the marketing, the Archimedes Engine novel, and the Traveler's Handbook is that the Celestials did not evolve into a single hegemonic state. The Traveler's Handbook and official site make it very clear that early Centauri history was violent and imperial, with genetic modification used to deliberately gain advantages. Over time, this produced populations that are now physically and culturally alien even to each other. Some celestial dominions appear to represent far more extreme evolutionary paths than, for instance, the crown celestials, who at least still appear humanoid. One example referenced in official materials is the Maruyama, who are, yes, a celestial group whose biology and behavior are very divergent even by post-human standards. However, beyond their existence and hostility, current sources that we have provide very little verified detail about the Maruyama's internal structure, their culture, or their political organization. So for now, they really just stand primarily as evidence of how far the celestial evolution can diverge, not as a dominion we can say meaningfully much about just yet. So when we say 20 plus celestial types, it doesn't really mean 22 well-documented types. It just means that there's probably that many branches, almost all of which are opaque to us right now. The exception, and the group that we understand in some amount of detail, is the Crown Dominion. Across almost all sources, the celestial attitude towards later arriving humans is remarkably consistent. From the official Exodus site, Celestials regard unevolved humans as barely more than animals, describing them as primitive, backwards, and inferior. In the Archimedes engine, this attitude is reinforced economically, not just philosophically. Humans are described as suitable for basic manual labor, disposable compared to androids, and valuable precisely because, unlike androids, they have no manufacturing cost. They're not framed as enemies, they're framed as resources. And that distinction matters because enemies provoke resistance, whereas resources just need managing. Celestial civilization is divided into dominions, large political entities that control territory, resources, and populations. As I said, dominions are not provinces of a single empire. They're independent power blocks that interact through diplomacy, rivalry, trade, and sometimes open hostility. From the novel and the marketing materials, we know the names of some of the dominions, such as the Crown Dominion, the Heresy Dominion, the Talocte, but outside the Crown Dominion, we just don't know very much yet. What is stated directly is that each dominion has its own strengths and areas of excellence, Diplomatic maneuvering between dominions is ongoing all the time, and that alliances exist between dominions, but they're fragile, they're politically motivated, and there's a lot of subterfuge. But that tells us something important. Celestial society is not post political. Immense age and power have not erased this very sort of human need for competition. It's just stretched it out over massive amounts of time. Both Exodus Marketing and the Archimedes engine present the crown as the dominant imperial force most directly interacting with humanity. Because of that, the Crown Dominion is the celestial power structure we know the most detail about. The Crown Dominion is ruled by an alliance of 5 great houses, referred to collectively as the Crown Celestials. It's comprised of 6 main star systems, each ruled by one of the grand houses of the Imperial Celestials, which I'll display on the screen. And it's also annexed several other systems, Kelowon being the one exception because Kelowon is controlled by all 5 houses equally. The reason for that being that the main imperial seat of power is in that system. While the Dominion controls this territory, they allow humans that are still arriving here and there on ark ships from old Earth or descended from them to settle on specific areas, most notably in the Kelowon system. But collectively, these houses control vast territorial holdings, critical energy infrastructure, all the military forces, and the diplomatic and intelligence networks. Their political structure is openly aristocratic and hereditary, but with a very interesting post-human twist. The Celestials are matriarchal. At the top of the Crown Dominion Society are the ruling queens. They're described with titles like the Now and Forever Queen, which emphasizes continuity rather than reign length. 5 houses each with a queen, with one of the 5 being the imperial queen over all of them. And they rotate that imperial queen position every 60 years. Needless to say, there's lots of tension between these queens, lots of spying and maneuvering, even though they've been allied with each other for thousands of years. Serving beneath each queen are many male archons. Archons are not just administrators. Various archons function as things like high-level political agents, diplomats, intelligence operatives, policy enforcers, sometimes warriors. What makes an archon effective is that he represents the will of his house across centuries, not just a human-like lifespan. And that's because of the crown's biggest genetically evolved advantage, functional immortality. On the topic of the birds and the bees, the Celestials have evolved to do that a little differently too, and I'm going to talk about that just super briefly. They seem to have sex in the normal human fashion, but then later the female produces some sort of large mucus-enclosed fetus, an egg for lack of a better term, and in some crazy ceremony, the act of labor in producing that egg prompts a hormonal change in the male who is there with her, the father, and his body produces a pouch like a marsupial, and he reverently takes that egg, inserts it into his pouch, and incubates it to term, and then produces that infant. Crown Celestials do not merely live a long time, although they do live a very long time. They preserve continuity of self through a process involving mind lines, a form of transferred consciousness or identity inheritance. In the Archimedes engine, an archon casually references having lived through dozens of host bodies. When a body ages or for some other reason becomes obsolete, the mind line is transferred into a new host. This process is explicitly referred to as anastasia. Not immortality in the sense of being invulnerable, but immortality as an unbroken chain of one consciousness over time. A crown archon is not a successor to prior leadership. They are prior leadership, carried forward intact in a new body. The mind line transfer is a foundational aspect of crown celestial biology and culture, but not every individual does this. It's selectively used to continue the lineage of specific individuals, most usually and to some degree exclusively, leaders in the Imperial Celestials, in particular the queens and the archons. I'll be brief here because it's fairly confusing. Adult Imperial Celestials, at least the queens do anyway, will mate over the years with a variety of partners, usually archons, for genetic trait diversity, and then they'll imprint selected personality traits onto multiple of their offspring. For the queens, that will always be females. All children receive minor transfers of knowledge called giftings, but eventually they'll select and groom only one to transfer into all of their memories and knowledge. The full transfer happens when the chosen child is an adolescent, in any event before that child turns 16. They must be old enough to act independently, but young enough that their individual personality can still be not totally subsumed, but heavily modified by the parent personality, after which the adult donor's body dies. Their memories, knowledge, experiences fully transferred to that selected offspring to live on for another 1,000 years. Children who are not chosen to be the recipient of a full mind line go on to live normal, very long celestial lives, and they retain the knowledge giftings that they received from their parent. And I should probably mention here that because this process is completely normal in imperial society, the children actually compete to be selected as the heir. The process, though, is absolutely central to the imperial now and forever queens and other very high-ranking leaders from the 5 family houses in order to maintain continuity across their generations. But this process eliminates problems such as succession crises or ideological or political drift over time or loss of institutional memory. And it also ensures that crown leadership continues to accumulate knowledge and carry forward historical context. The crown dominion's dominance is not just ideological or military, it's also economic. One of the clearest examples is control of the He-Sea, a vast helium-3 resource essential for energy production. The He-Sea is harvested by fleets owned by the 5 royal families. Fuel licensing, access, and distribution are tightly controlled, which gives the crown leverage over both civilians and other political entities. Within the crown dominion, humans, again, occupy a clearly subordinate position. Humans are labor, they're servants, and they're assets within an economic system. They're permitted to exist where they're useful. They're not regarded as political movers or equals. Marketing materials emphasize that the humans arriving in Centauri must either fight for survival or be forced into service under the crown. All of the framing for the game seems to make one thing very clear. Humanity is in a struggle for leverage so that they can get out from under the heel of the Celestials. The Celestials are interesting because they aren't villains due to being aliens. What makes them interesting and unsettling is that they are, for the most part, recognizably human. They were human, stretched across time, power, and unlimited bioengineering. And they didn't distinguish themselves by destiny either, but by timing. They just arrived earlier, and they used that advantage to reshape themselves beyond recognition. And yet, rather than preserving or protecting their cradle species, they treat later arriving humans as livestock, sometimes useful, but always inferior and always expendable. The conflict at the heart of the game seems to be not humanity versus the unknown. It's humanity fighting for survival against its own relatives, its descendants, really. That's the Celestials. I hope you found this informative. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, enjoy your day.